The Great Leap to Paris. Springtime in Paris meant erratic weather. Since relocating here months ago to start anew, I spent days basking in the comfortably warm weather, but could not avoid the occasional downpours. We cannot have sunshine without a little rain, I suppose. Since moving to France 8 months ago, I have developed a routine. Every Wednesday morning, Wednesdays were my day off. It was pretty odd to have a midweek break, but I appreciated it all the same. I would take my Mason Tamboit bike for an early ride to my favorite cafe. Debut coffee in Delhi. My bicycle was my first big investment in Paris, but I did not regret it one bit. It was environmentally friendly, functional, and very convenient. I relished every bike ride I've had in Paris since. Cycling gives me the peace of mind I need, in the exact ambiance I came to France for. Although Debut was just a stone's throw away from my apartment, I rode my bike all the same, just in case I wanted to go grocery shopping or run more errands after my morning me time. This Wednesday was no different, with the weather in France slowly transitioning into summer, but still blessing us with occasional light showers of rain. I sported a thin gray turtleneck and packed my black leather jacket for good measure. As I was parking my bike just outside Debut and utilizing my bike lock, just to be safe from thieves, the smell of fresh pastries wafted into my nose. I adored the smell of Parisian cafes. I almost salivated at the mere thought of getting my favorite combination from the cafe: lemon curd tartlets topped with some raspberries and a warm cup of cappuccino. What can I say? I was a person of routine. The cafe's tiny bell rang as I walked through the door. There were more people than usual. Some were regulars, like the old couple in the farthest corner and the cramming university students whom I see every so often. I ordered my regular, making small talk with the amicable owner, Mira, as I waited. Thankfully, despite the number of people in the cafe, the table adjacent to the window was free. I put my food and coffee down and started unpacking my satchel. The table next to me was occupied by 3 men clad in stylish business suits who were having a serious, hushed discussion. As I was flipping open my book of the week, On the Come Up, by Angie Thomas, I made eye contact with one of the corporate-looking guys from the nearby table, sitting on the side opposite me. As his icy blue eyes momentarily met my gray ones, my heart skipped a beat. He looked straight out of a magazine. He had that kind of boyish handsomeness that you would glance at on the streets, then have you do a double take. Previously, I found darker eyes to be attractive. I never thought blue eyes could be that captivating. But his were. Blushing, I swiftly diverted my eyes back to my book as I sipped my cappuccino and consumed my tart. I stole glances at the bewitching young man from time to time. Something about his aura was like a magnetic field, drawing me in and attracting my attention. To my surprise, our eyes met a couple more times, and there were even a few instances that I looked at him only to see him looking at me already. I surely hoped that he did not find my gaze uncomfortable or creepy. On the other hand, I was making little to no progress on my book. Although I was almost done with my coffee and tart, I just could not concentrate today. For some reason, I did not know what distracted me more: the hustle and bustle within the cafe today, or the attractive man seated on the next table, probably the latter. Not long after, the 2 other businessmen on the nearby table stood up, packing their briefcases and motioning towards the door. The man who caught my interest muttered something I didn't quite hear because of the little chit-chats reverberating throughout the cafe. One of his colleagues, I presume, patted him on the back, and they all said their goodbyes, leaving the man alone on the table. While still seated at their table, he gestured towards the seat directly across me. He questioned. I, puzzled, but curious, I nodded. He took the seat right across from me, putting his black briefcase on the empty chair next to him. "Do you come here often?" he said as I continued to look at him perplexedly. His voice was deep, and he had a slight accent, although he did not sound French. I raised my eyebrows and took a sip of my cappuccino. "You hit on everyone you see in a coffee shop?" I bantered. He laughed, an angelic chuckle that made my heart skip a little. The way his blue eyes crinkled, and how he threw his head back slightly when he laughed clearly did not help the butterflies that started settling in my stomach. This man was charming. My bad, he mumbled. "I'm Adrian." Once again, I raised my eyebrows. I was incredulous, to say the least. During my time in France, nobody has ever hit on me that randomly. except in a bar where my workmate and friend Celeste took me regularly. But it was nice to know that the immediate attraction I felt towards this man seemed a mutual feeling. My brain subconsciously went to my ex-boyfriend. Chance, are you seeing this right now? I'm almost 6,000 miles away from home. And I still got it. I thought to myself. I merely stared at him though, wary but curious on where this was heading. My silence, in baffled countenance, must have alarmed him because he then started babbling. You know what? I just approached because I felt, something. It was just, but forget it. He rambled. It was nice to. I felt it, too. I interrupted, saving him from the embarrassment. Kind of hard not to. Especially if you haven't felt it in a while. His face immediately shifted from flushed, kind of embarrassed, to full-on blushing. He cracked a smile, looking down at his hands momentarily, and then audibly let out a sigh of relief. You come here often? He asked again. I smiled widely. Yeah, I do. I unwind here weekly, I replied. I get my daily caffeine here, too. On the go. He shook his head vigorously. First time. Actually, I just arrived here a few days back and had a business meeting today. I learned that he was from a small town in Canada and had just moved to Paris early on this week. Just like me, he was renting a small apartment in the city and was living by himself. If I had not been captivated by him earlier on, I surely was now. He was a natural storyteller. A person who made the conversation flow with ease and instantly made me feel comfortable. He said he was hired by a French marketing firm and was looking forward to rebuilding his life here. I must have been overly invested in his story, but you could not blame me. The way he spoke was almost bewitching, making me cling onto his every word in each revelation, making me want to listen to him more and more. His slightly animated gestures were also adorable, and the twinkle in his eyes as he expressed how much he is loving Paris so far was too cute. I mostly listened and inputted my comments occasionally, but not really sharing my own stories until he called me out for it. Hey, I have been babbling about myself here, he noted. I will order one more coffee and then it's your turn. Alright, you want anything? I shook my head, then watched as he headed towards the counter. It almost felt like my fight or flight response was activated. It was alarming how rapidly I felt comfortable with this guy. He was a stranger. For all I know, he could be a con artist. Was I sure that I wanted him to get to know me? I could just leave now while he was ordering his new cup of coffee. He would not even see me. We probably would not see each other again. If we do, I could just brush it off and pretend I didn't know him. I would probably forget him anyway. However, I berated myself for my spiraling thoughts. We were just getting to know each other. There was no certainty that it would lead up to anything more. If anything, I could gain a new friend here in Paris, which I surely needed. I had been solitary all my months here, besides the company of my work friend Celeste occasionally. Besides, the connection was too strong to ignore. I could not put it into words. But do you ever meet someone and you just click? This was one of those moments. I shoved my doubts and worries to the back of my head. This may be the start of a blossoming friendship. Nothing more. My past may hold me back from pursuing romantic connections, but it certainly does not close my doors to forging camaraderies. Adrian returned with a cup of iced coffee and 2 strawberry tarts. He handed one over to me, and I graciously thanked him for the thought. Okay, Dalton, I'm listening, he said, clasping his hands together and leaning closer towards me. I took a bite of the delectable pastry. Inside? Well, I began, and looked down on my lap. I'm not that interesting. As I said, I'm from California, moved here about 8 months ago. I'm a copywriter for a publishing house here, and I love to read. That about sums me up. I'm boring, I know. Adrian was grinning like a Cheshire cat while watching me intently. His eyes, despite their bluish intensity, were very warm, and I felt at ease immediately. He reassured me that I was most definitely not boring. This then went on for a bit, him prompting me about my interests from time to time. I found myself stopping, conscious that I was oversharing and he was no longer interested in what I had to say. But his interest seemed genuine, and when it was evident that I cautiously told my narratives, lest he became disinterested, he just kept prodding comfortably. I would feel reassured at once. I found out that despite our juxtaposing careers, him being in marketing and me invested in literature, we had plenty of interests. We were both massive Harry Potter fans. We adored Studio Ghibli films, and listened to a lot of common artists. Our overlaps were pretty random, but I found comfort in knowing that someone else could relate to the eccentric mix of my favorite things. Before we knew it, it was after lunch. To his dismay, Adrian had another meeting to attend. This time it was in their office, so he had to take the subway. We were still chatting on the way out of the cafe, and he walked over with me to where my bicycle was parked. "So," he began shyly, "will I see you again?" He must have seen the apprehension that engulfed my face after he said that, because he gave a sad smile that told me he understood. His eyes were a dead giveaway, too, because they lost the twinkle that they had as we were conversing earlier. My heart was racing. It was not that I felt a pang of guilt, but more notably, it was because in the short time we had spoken, it seemed as though I already had a deep connection with this man. And he wanted to sustain it. Deep down, I knew I wanted to sustain it, too. There had been plenty of moments in my life that I took a great leap, when I came out to my parents. When I chose to pursue a career in literature, abandoning my future and my family's business. When I moved to Paris, I did not know anyone. I did not even speak their language. I was 6,000 miles away from home, and I took that great leap. And so, I decided to take another one. Now, that Wednesday marked the start of what would become a weekly tradition for me and Adrian. Occasionally, he would be having a meeting at Debut or some other coffee shop and then meet me in the former for yet another round of chit-chat. I looked forward to Wednesdays more now because while it was no longer reserved for morning, me time, I was spending it with someone whose company I genuinely enjoyed more than my own. We mostly talked about our interests. Well, it was mainly me who spoke about the things I loved, and that was because sharing personal experiences and more private information was not a level one reached yet. Adrian, on the other hand, was comfortable in letting me in. He was an only child and was raised by a single mother who sounded like the most hard-working soul. She took on 3 jobs to get him through college, despite him also being a working student to lessen their expenses. He was a terrible baker but an excellent cook. I found this funny, as we were the exact opposites. I enjoyed baking pastries and sweets but despised doing anything else in the kitchen. He would tell stories about his mother and the recipes she had taught him over the years. He would tell stories of his childhood, about how he never felt lonely despite not having a father or siblings because his mother always made sure that he was well loved. He would tell his college adventures and how every mischief led him here. Slowly, as our Wednesday debut chatters turned to Sunday strolls around tourist destinations and public parks, to him waiting for me to finish work outside the publishing house, I found myself opening up, too. It was a gloomy Parisian afternoon when I spoke to him about my family. We were taking a stroll around Parc Monceau, a gorgeous park not too far from my apartment. The pavement still damp from the rain showers earlier, and the skies were looking ever so dreary. But somehow my mood was light. Gone were the days that gloomy weather would equate to me feeling down. I guess Adrian's presence gave me hope somehow. He was my sunshine. Dressed lightly and with Artico coffee cups in hand, we sauntered around the park. Flowers were blooming, children were on swings, families were having picnics, and everything seemed to be falling in place. I had been telling him about my family history, about how my father was a business tycoon in California and my mother was a socialite. I also spoke of my 2 older siblings, Diana and Dylan. The former had her own family and was based in London, a mere 2-hour train ride from here, which was why my parents ended up supporting my move in the first place. The latter was the heir to my family's real estate business and was in the process of planning a massive beach wedding back home in California. He was floored, unbelieving that I came from old money, given that I lived a simple life and was thrifty during all the times we went out. "You never failed to surprise me. You know that," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "How can you be like some hotshot millionaire or something from Cali and not tell me? I wouldn't have treated you to this coffee." "Perhaps," I chuckled. "False. You would still treat me. You're just generous like that," I retorted. He blushed, turning a deep scarlet and looking down at his feet. It was one of his subconscious gestures that I had noticed over the past few weeks, and I found it adorable. We then ended up stopping at a cart selling crepes. I treated him this time around, ordering each of his crepes topped with hazelnut spread and strawberry. We sat on a nearby bench to devour the classic Parisian snack, chatting, eating, and watching little kids run around. What did your parents think about you moving here then? Given you had such a bright future ahead of you in California. You know? He queried while looking at me intently. I wiped my mouth with tissue before I spoke, aware that I was somewhat of a messy eater. Well, my mom was upset for the most part. I mean, I'm the youngest, so I'm like the baby of the family. But she came around. Dan is supportive. I think he's just relieved that my brother Dylan was running the company anyway. So they didn't really need me. But I needed this, I said, gesturing to the flora around us and referring to the overall ambience of Paris. Fair, he said. I wish I had that kind of privilege. Just moving to a whole new country because I needed a fresh start. Or whatever. I let out a small laugh. I mean, when you put it like that, it sounds good and refreshing. But it's still hard. I've been here what? 9 months now? I'm just now figuring out my purpose. I guess. What about you? You never told me why you moved. He finished off his food and gave a small melancholic smile. You're looking for yourself. I'm also looking for someone. I'm looking for my father. Adrian then told me even more stories about his childhood. And although up to this point I thought he had shared to me pretty much every major detail about his life in Canada, I was so wrong. He grew up in a single-parent household and had never met his father. He came to France hoping to find him. He said his mother supported his decision and wanted him to meet his father, too. So, after paying off his college debt and securing a job in Paris, he took the leap and flew here. It hit me how different our aspirations were upon moving here. I came here for a fresh start so I could forget my past and start anew. He came here to revisit his past so he could come to know his father. But despite all our differences, be it in our family backgrounds or what we aimed to get out of our time in Paris, we somehow worked. With him, I did not have to spend time rummaging through my closet thinking of the best possible outfit to impress him because I knew he would appreciate me regardless of what I wore. With him, I did not have to pretend like I enjoyed fine dining. Street food worked. Hell, we even enjoyed McDonald's together frequently. What we shared looked nothing like my past relationship. And as I reflected on how far we have gotten over the past few weeks, I could not help but think of it like a movie reel. It seemed like I was watching my own rebirth. My old self slowly coming back. But this time better. Ignited by meeting Adrian. Later that week, I expressed my sentiments to my older sister and confidant, Diana. We were having lunch in a fancy restaurant in the city called Brasserie Mollard over some white wine. I told her about Adrian and my reservations about this blooming relationship. I mean, at some point you had to tell him about Chance, right? Of course. She just had to bring up my pos of an ex-boyfriend. Why would I? I queried, biting into the delicious lobster that I had ordered. Diana rolled her eyes. You came here for a fresh start. You meet this guy who is too good to be true. Shares all of his life with you. And you build this connection with him. But he doesn't even know you're here to forget about someone. See how screwed up that is? Now it did not take much convincing. After Diana left later that week to return to London, I invited Adrian over for wine night. I opened a rosé wine and made a simple cheese board, laid some blankets on my balcony, and lit some candles. It was pretty romantic, if I do say so myself. Wow, he went all out trying to impress me. Huh? He nudged me and raised his eyebrows playfully. I cackled, while I was also somewhat trying to prepare a romantic night for us. I also did it to calm my nerves. Being all by myself in Paris for the past months meant that opening up to someone was nerve-wracking for me. Like a foreign experience or a habit that I had forgotten how to do because of time and tragedy. We chit-chatted for a while, talking about work and my sister's visit earlier that week. I was somehow stalling, and he must have noticed because not long after he asked why I put in all this effort. I mean, yeah, it is kind of weird. We're always used to going out spontaneously, doing whatever around Paris. I replied. He took a sip of his wine and smirked. You're doing it again, stalling. He commented, I don't mind, though. Don't get me wrong, you can take all the time you need in the world and just know I appreciate all your effort. I don't deserve this. I smiled and put my hand over his. You do. Every bit of it. You deserve the effort. You deserve the thought. You deserve all the good things in life. I sighed, gazing at his warm blue eyes that had become synonymous to home for me for the short time I had known him. You deserve to get back the love you have been giving me. I know we haven't said it, but you never failed to show it to me. Giving me your flannel when you notice I'm cold. Never failing to give me a postcard every single time we met since that Wednesday in the cafe. fetching me from work no matter how tired you are. I see it, and I want to give myself to you fully because you deserve that and more. But before that, I need to tell you parts of me that I haven't shown you. And if you still want me after that, then I'm willing to give all of you to me." He squeezed my hand gently, scooting more closely towards me. We were sitting on the blankets that I had laid on the floor of my balcony. "I'm all ears," he said. I then laid down and asked him to do the same, gazing at the starry Parisian skies instead of at each other's eyes. I figured looking him in the eye while I told the trauma and tragedy of my past relationship would be too difficult to do. Over the next hour, I recalled my 5-year relationship with Chance and how it deteriorated from a storybook high school romance tale to an emotionally abusive, one-sided dynamic, as I told him about the multiple times I was cheated on. He held my hand throughout it all. He need not speak a single word because his presence was so there. He squeezed my hand every now and then and wiped my tears when the memories were much too painful to recall. Finally, one fine day last year, I caught him cheating again in my apartment that we shared. He had the audacity to bring his lover to the place where we were supposed to start building our family. And I should have been angry, right? I mean, somehow I was, but I also felt liberated because that was my last straw. That same night, I made the decision to move here. I told my family the next day. And by the end of the week, I was on a flight heading to CDG. I berated myself for the first few months I was here. I mourned the relationship I had been trying to bandage. But more importantly, I mourned all the times that I had spent disrespecting myself by accepting him after every cheating incident and loving him. I lost myself. Adrian gave my hand another squeeze and ran his hands through my dirty blonde hair. The latter was a newly found habit of his that I found great comfort in. So, if you were wondering why I was shy, closed off, and just seemingly unmoving at first, this is why. He shook his head, his eyes meeting my gray ones. No, I actually didn't. I knew you would tell me all about you and the intricate stories you had when you were ready. When I met you, I immediately knew that you were everything I could ever want in a person. I didn't know all of you just yet, but the parts one knew I already loved in ways I've never loved before. I was more than honored that you showed me parts of you bit by bit. To know you even just in that sense at first was more than enough. I'm happy to know you. And I'm happy to love you. My breath hitched, and I was evidently floored. Silence engulfed us for a few seconds before he broke it. You don't have to say anything now. This was probably bad timing. But I had to say it tonight. You mustered up the courage to tell me about your past. And a part of me hopes that you did that because you see a future for us. I want you to know that I see your scars. Now I've seen them. That day in the cafe. But I embrace them, and it doesn't change how I feel about you. We had more wine that night, laid with each other side by side, and chit-chatted until it was time for him to head home. We decided to have a picnic near the Eiffel Tower the next day because ironically, in the past month Adrian had spent in France. He had only seen the famed tourist site in passing. Of course, he did not leave without leaving me a postcard. This was a habit he developed shortly after we met. Every single time he came to see me, he would bring with him a postcard and write a sweet message at the back. I kept every single one of them in a box beside my bed. Why did you start doing that? I finally asked that night. I always dreamed of coming to Paris. So when I was a kid, I started buying these postcards of France from a little shop in Ontario. I told my mom that one day I will go there and find my dad. I will also go there with the love of my life. Who knew that I would find the love of my life here? So, I started giving you the postcards so that you'll have a piece of my past. They are a reminder of my dreams as a kid and how those dreams collided with meeting you right here in Paris. That night, he wrote on a postcard before you left. With a soft kiss, he gave me a postcard of the Eiffel Tower with a handwritten note at the back saying, "I do believe that while love can hurt, love also heals." The end. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.